It's Elizabeth Payton, the international styles correspondent of the New York Times. Welcome. It's nice to see so many of you after a bit of a break. I am about to be joined by Janty Yeates, who is the costume designer for the House of Gucci film, starring Lady Gaga and Adam Driver, and that will be released in November. I'm just waiting for her to join us, so if you could be patient, she should be with me any second now. I'd really like to have some of your questions. So just one second. Hi, everybody. Hi. Nice to see everybody. Right, let's see. No, I'm just waiting for her to join me. Just give me 1 second. As I said, Janty Yeates, who is the Here she is. Okay, hi. So she should be joining me in just a second. But I'd just like to say it's the first day of Milan Fashion Week this week. And normally today would be the Gucci show. Gucci would kick off proceedings. But they're not this season. They're showing in LA later this year. Here she is, Janty. Hello, how are you?
I'm so sorry. I'm a bit of a technical nerd and it was quite complicated. So I had to get my young junior to hook me up with you.
Well, here you are, and it's wonderful to see you. I was just giving a quick introduction, which is that normally Gucci would be the first show at Milan Fashion Week this week. It's not. It's showing later in LA, but everyone's still talking about it. And I think it's a lot to do with the House of Gucci film, which everybody has been chatting about for a lot of the year on social media. And I think that has a lot to do with you and your work as the costume designer. So thank you so much for joining us. And I guess I'd like to start just by asking you how and when you got involved with the project in the first place.
To be honest, I've been involved for some time because Janina Scott, Lady Scott, Sir Ridley's wife, had the project, she thinks, about 20 years ago. She was friends with the Guccis, and then Sarah Harden brought out her book. And so the script was written, and basically it went to RSA, to Sir Ridley's company. Ridley was going to do it. That was about 6 years ago. So I chimed in then, hello, what about me? And then it went away and it went to Wong Kar-wai, which would have been a different film, I think, somehow. And then it came back to Ridley's company and some other directors were involved. And then Ridley decided to do it. So, and we had a fait accompli with LG, which was wonderful. And we just jumped in.
And just for those of you who may not know, so Ridley Scott is the director of the House of Gucci film and a long-time collaborator with Janty. I guess it looks like you've been working on films for the best part of 20 years, if not longer now. For a film like this and of this scale, Janty, how long do you need in pre-production to get all the costumes ready? And another question is, for you, are you focused just on the lead characters, or are you developing the wider world of the entire film, all the extras and the supporting characters as well?
Everything. The buck stops here. You know. However, I was very fortunate insofar as the head of physical production. I spoke to her last July. In the middle of lockdown, I was asked to do 6 weeks of research and development. And I said, can we get my cutter started early? And she, being a very, very wonderful person, said yes. And so we started in September. Normally, they would have probably given me 4 months.
Right.
But everything was made for LG. Everything was made for Adam Driver. Everything was made for Al Pacino. And everything was made for Jared Leto. So, yes, I was concentrating on those. But I also rented all the costumes for all the crowd. We had something like 80 actors. Camille Cotin as well, who played Paola. And a lot of the mother of the bride, the father of the bride, you know, they were all very important actors. And of course, I was completely responsible for them. So the buck does stop with me, I'm afraid.
I'm going to do this a couple of times just because I know people are constantly joining us. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Payton. I am a fashion reporter with the New York Times. I'm being joined at the moment by Janty Yeates, who is the costume designer for the House of Gucci film starring Lady Gaga and Adam Driver, which is set to be released in about 6 weeks' time. And we're hearing all about what goes into the costume design on a film of this scale and size. Janty, some people joining us will know the plot line of the film. They will know the story of greed and revenge and murder and fashion and everything else that is involved in this story. But can you describe a little bit about the fashion of early 1990s Italy for those who might not really know? What kind of aesthetic were you working with when you were developing all of these costumes?
Well, the film starts in 75.
Right.
And so we went through probably 4 different looks, 75 to 95. We covered the 20 years fashion, and it changed so dramatically. And basically, LG plays Patrizia Reggiani, who was a small-time, rich, nouveau riche girl. She looked like Elizabeth Taylor. She caught the eye of every man, and she landed Maurizio Gucci. And the rest was marriage and children. And it was only after 14 years of their separation when they discovered that he was going to go possibly and marry another woman, that she plotted to have him killed so that the children would benefit from the will, because he was worth squillions by then.
Mm. And in terms of how you researched for the costumes and the different stages that this couple went through and the characters went through, did Kering give you access to the archives? Because obviously in the 90s, Gucci was a family business, but it's now owned by Kering, the French luxury group. What was your relationship like with them and being able to access the archives of the fashion house?
We were able to access the archives of the fashion house Gucci in Florence in October, which was wonderful. I was able to take them out, or they took them out, and they sent them to LA, where we fit them on LG in one of our many Zoom fittings that we had. They fit her like a glove. They were wonderful. And
were there any specific looks from the archive that you particularly remember working very well on her?
Well, they all looked spectacular. The 2 that we used for the film, one was a trouser suit, all with a Gucci logo, and the other was a Gucci logo blouse with a brown leather skirt, when she meets Dominic de Sole, who played the lawyer. Jack Houston plays him, and she's picking her daughter up from sports day at school, and he approaches and hands her divorce papers. And she flips out. And the other scene when she's wearing Gucci is when she's discovered her cleaner has exactly the same Gucci bag that she does. And she discovers this whole array of fakes. And she goes down to 49th Street. She's based in New York then. And she just is furious.
I can't wait to see so many of these outfits. But I guess one thing I picked up on there is there are some looks that are actually from the Gucci archives. Is that correct? That are used in the film? And then tell me a little bit about how you source other looks. Do you use vintage dealers? Do you make a certain proportion using your own seamstresses? How does it work when you're creating a wardrobe for a character like this?
Everything. We basically, my cutter started in September. He had 5 wonderful seamstresses. He cut the most beautiful looks. He basically, Ridley didn't want her to be a Joan Collins of the dynasty type. Basically, he wanted her more Gina Lollobrigida. So I was slightly nervous knowing LG's penchant for extremes, but she said to me in the very first Zoom, she said, I want to dress like my mother. did
Right.
in that time. So that was a great
Because
relief.
Lady Gaga is half Italian, isn't
Yes,
she, of
she
course?
is. She
Right.
is. And her mother is fully Italian. And that was great because we were able to temper it. We zhuzhed it up with loads of jewelry. You know, she'd often wear 2 necklaces, 4 bracelets, many pins, and any, you know, different earrings. We would analyze every single scene. She had 54 different looks, different days in the script.
And every day of that, one of those 54 days was a different look, was it?
Yeah, she wouldn't repeat anything, down to the earrings.
And then in terms of vintage, though, you were also able to source some vintage looks from the period?
Oh, absolutely. We had Tirelli, the costume house in Rome, and Anamode, the costume house in Rome. They had wonderful archives. We bought from Uto, which is out of the ordinary vintage. Basically, we found vintage everywhere, on eBay, on Etsy, you name it. We found it everywhere. Plus, LG's own personal archive, she opened her doors to me. It was so marvelous. And I was able to, you know, a lot of it was quite extreme, but I was able to go through it online, and we put some stuff aside. And then towards the end, she spoke to the Alaya people and the Valentino people, and we got the odd piece from them that she wore. So it was really from everywhere and anywhere, and a lot. We made a huge amount. Some didn't get seen in the film, but you know, you can't have everything.
That's just how the cookie crumbles, I imagine,
Exactly.
on a project like this.
And Adam, I made all his suits and all his blazers and trousers, all his shirts. Al Pacino, the same, all his suits, all his shirts. I had a marvelous tailor in New York, who is Savile Row. He did all my suits for Denzel Washington on American Gangster. However, he fell ill halfway through, so Xenia took over, and then he came back. So we were spoilt for wonderful men's suits and glorious coats, cashmere coats with velvet collars. And then Jared, who was, we called him the dandy, he basically was made by Cesare Attolini, the Sartoria, who made all the clothes for, or all the costumes for The Great Beauty, the film The Great Beauty. And they made all his suits, bar a couple.
I can see from the comments that are scrolling up just how excited everyone is to see this. I'm just going to do a quick reintroduction for everybody who's joining us. Hello, I'm Elizabeth Payton. I'm a reporter with the New York Times. I'm currently with Janty Yeates, who is the costume designer for the House of Gucci film, starring Lady Gaga and Adam Driver, which is being released in November, I believe. And we're talking about the costumes and the process that goes into creating costumes, particularly for a film with foundations in fashion like this one. One other thing for everybody who's joining us, if you have a question, I can see some questions coming up. There's a little speech mark with a question mark in it. If you have a question for Janty that you'd like to ask at the end of the session, please put your question in there and I'll take a look at it towards the end of the session. And if we have time, I'll ask her a couple, because I can see some good ones coming through and I don't want to miss them. So I want to go back, you call her LG, Lady Gaga. Obviously, you've been working very closely with her on this film. Tell me, what's it like working with Lady Gaga, and how involved was she in creating specific looks for specific moments for this character?
Every fitting we did, she was so involved. She is complete, and she's a clothes horse because she looks marvelous in everything. But she's totally costume ready. You know, she knows everything about every single costume, and she was really, really helpful. Obviously, we would put in the rails and she'd go, that's the one for this scene, and we'd reenact the scene, and she'd talk about her hair, she'd talk about her makeup, and we'd stay there for possibly sometimes an hour until we got the actual rings right, the earrings right, the bags, the shoes, everything. She was very, very involved. I mean, I put the costumes there in the first place, I selected them, and then she selected from there.
I suppose what's quite interesting about this project, Janty, which you haven't necessarily had in all your projects, is this had a huge media profile. The real life story of this had a huge media profile. So you would have had a large number of paparazzi photographs, media reels of specific outfits at specific times in the narrative. So, you know, from your point of view, how much do you try and recreate those specific looks for any events versus using your imagination and creativity to sort of envisage specific looks that would have been worn behind closed doors, if you like?
Well, basically, the Paps were out every single morning. They captured her before we even turned over. So the press and online knew about what she was wearing before we'd even got it in the can, as it were. And my producer said, listen, we can't do anything about it. It was Rome, for heaven's sake. LG didn't mind. And so it was great. It actually fed the fuel to the fire. And so that was no bad thing. We basically knew that Gucci told us that Patrizia loved Yves Saint Laurent. And she was a great haute couture buyer. So we did copy several of the looks that we'd researched in the photos. You always research the granny out of every film. You have to. And then you can do a little bit of, you know, sneaking around. So, for example, one red dress was based on a pink dress that she was snapped in, the real Patrizia, that is. And we went to the set and Ridley went, what's this? She said, I want legs. So we had to cut 18 inches. We put apple box.
Not a beautiful handmade, hand-sewn red girl.
It looked great.
I'm sure it did.
You know, we all muck in, and whatever Ridley says, he's the director, so whatever he says goes. And LG was quite happy to be in a knee-length dress as opposed to a full-length dress. You know, that's the way.
To ask you actually, just, you know, for those who are just joining us, Janty has worked with Sir Ridley Scott on many of his most famous films. I know you in fact won an Oscar for your costume design for Gladiator. So you guys have worked together for a very long time. How involved does he get, I suppose, in costume decisions? It sounds like from that little anecdote that he does get quite involved. But what is that working relationship like between you two, between director and costume designer?
Well, he's very hands-on costume-wise. He will always come to lead actors' fittings, because it's always a great opportunity to just chat and discuss the role. But he's very involved. He certainly doesn't like certain things and he loves certain things. But, you know, I'm just always lucky to be asked back. So I'm just very grateful.
I can see that time is ticking. We've been allocated 20 minutes for this. So I'm going to ask you one more question, which I always like to ask anybody I'm interviewing for this slot. And then I'm going to look at the questions, quite a few questions that we've had from those who have joined us for the conversation. You know, a lot of people who join us for these chats are aspiring to get into the fashion or entertainment industries. They're not necessarily based in London or New York or any of the big hubs. For you, as somebody who's at the top of their field in film costume design, what would be some of the tips or advice you would give to aspiring young professionals who would want to get into a similar field as you, whether it's a certain educational path or work experience, anything really that you think might help them?
Well, basically, I started making clothes for myself on my grandmother's treadle sewing machine when I was 11. And my sewing machine, when I was given it at the age of 13, became my best friend. So I think that helped. You know, fabric. I was cutting out bell-bottom flares, you know, without a pattern. I knew they'd fit when I was 14 or 15 for Saturday night. And then I went to pattern cutting school and dress design school. Then I went and worked in wholesale fashion, which I realized I was not going to be a John Galliano. I was not going to be an Alexander McQueen. You know, I just, didn't have the money to set yourself up. But I basically became an assistant, worked for nothing, didn't want to stay in wholesale fashion. Sorry, wholesale fashion people. But basically I was out on commercials. I was doing pop, back in the day when we did pop promos. I was doing pop promos for nothing, working through the night. And then gradually you got onto a small salary, and you've got to really, really want to do it.
Right. So you mean you have to be absolutely dedicated and prepared to work long hours, but for not very much pay. Do you think, obviously, when you were starting out, there was no social media. Do you think that social media or is something that people can use to create portfolios, blogs? How do they platform their work and show the industry what they're doing?
Well, nowadays, there's much more opportunity. I mean, I was just going through my boyfriend's friends. And, I didn't know anybody in the industry, in television, in film, in theatre. I didn't know anyone. So now you can create your own fashion. You can open your Instagram account and you can show the world your fashion. You can go on YouTube. You can easily, it's more easy. I'm not saying anything is easy in this business. However, the British film industry is thriving. I mean, really, when I started, we were lucky if there was sort of 4 or 5 films a year. Now we have all the streaming platforms. There's always an opportunity out there, but do get your basics. Don't just go out there and pitch, because you're going to
do your homework.
Do your homework, learn how to make costumes, learn about fabrics, learn how silk feels, learn how to pleat, do that sort of thing. Learn how to break down. That's a huge part of filmmaking. Nobody really appreciates it, but to age and break down and dye and print, it's a huge, huge bonus to know things like that.
Just a couple of questions now, Janty, there's someone that I might be easier and some a little bit more tricky. One is, how many costumes do you think you made in total for the entire film? That's from Sasha Joseph.
Well, we probably did about 75 to 100 for LG. I made 50 suits, jackets, coats. I know I did 45 shirts for Adam because we did doubles. And then we did another 15 or 16. So best part of 75 shirts. Al, we did 14 suits, and then Xenia came in and they made other suits. We made something like 8 or 10 suits for Jared. Sadly, didn't use them all. But again, the shirts and the ties were with. We made Mother of the Bride, made her 2 or 3 outfits. I don't know, probably, say 300. Something like that altogether.
And but another question we got was, where do all these costumes go when they've been used?
Well, they're all in a warehouse outside Rome, because we were in Rome for 6 months filming and prepping, and they're all there until the film is released, and they're under embargo there.
Right. Got it. This is a question you may not know the answer to, but 5 people have asked this, so clearly people are interested. Do you know if any of the looks in the film will be replicated and sold on the market? Yeah.
Let's get the film out first, and then we can see what everybody thinks about it.
2 more then, because I know we're running out of time. How many people were involved in your costume design team for a film like this?
In my costume design team or the whole costume team?
I think they mean the whole costume department, but maybe it would be interesting just to know the different facets within your department anyway.
Well, I had 2 ACDs, a senior one and a junior one. I had that's assistant costume designers. I had an associate costume designer we had to recreate the whole of Tom Ford's 1995 show, the one with the spectacular velvets. And we had to recreate the 1984 Versace show. And my associate designer, Stefano Donadis, did all of them from scratch. Wow. He made them all, not himself personally. And then we also did a Paolo Gucci show, which was a thing of fiction, but glorious looks, which was supposed to be a disaster, but actually they were rather nice. So there was himself, my cutter. I had another cutter as well who was making costumes, and she had 3 workers, 3 seamstresses all the time. I had a breakdown team. We had probably about 10 or 15 in the crowd, and I had my amazing crowd master, Claudio Mantz and Costanza and Maurizio Torti. They are just amazing. And 2 buyers, 2 admin. I've never counted them up, to be honest, but yes.
It clearly takes a village. There's a lot of people involved in getting this over the line. Very last question now from Lindsay, which is, I went Gaga, she says, over the ski looks. What were your favourite looks from the film?
Well, thank you, Lindsay. That's very kind of you. I actually selected from one of the costume houses from Animode the original all-in-one suits. And Ridley had always said, I want both of them to be in white because they were childhood friends. And it was bringing them together. It was a visual excuse for them to go, oh, hello, you're in white, I'm in white. And Gaga had to be in red, didn't she? Because she didn't go anywhere near skis. And Postscript made those for us, which is a wonderful ski making fabulous company. I think my favorite that I really have in my heart is the bride's dress, because it was such a labor of love. All that lace was appliqued by hand, and the Dominic Young, my cutter, we actually had a bit of a fright because LG said, well, shouldn't we have the original dress as well? So that was made not by my cutter, but it was made, and we just looked at it on the day and went, no, it's too
not quite right.
It's too plain. She was very simply dressed as a bride. So I loved that, but I loved everything she wore. I really did.
Well, we're all looking forward to seeing this film. I can see so many people saying that they're really, really excited. So thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful to chat to you. Thank you so much to everybody for joining us. It's been great to see you all. And I'll be joining you again on Saturday when I'm talking to the creative director of Marnie. But until then, thanks very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, Janty, and thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you, Lizzie.
Bye.
Bye.